Alrighty, thank you everyone for joining us. We will get started. I'd like to begin by thanking everyone for taking the time to join us this evening. I'd also like to thank Bay State Co-Housing for hosting us here at this wonderful venue. Democracy happens in courtyards like this, through conversations like this, and it cannot function without an active and involved group of citizens working to build understanding together. So thank you all for being here. Before we get started, I do want to take a quick moment of silence to remember two recent losses in the cycling community: Denise Olson, a 74-year-old cyclist, and Louisa Gagg, an activist and transportation planner. These deaths are preventable, and we refuse to accept the status quo. Thank you again for joining us tonight. To jump right into it, we'd like to give the candidates 2 minutes each to give a brief introduction, sharing a background of who they are, the work they've done, and what motivated them to run for this Senate position. We can start with Carey, then Kate, and finish with Ryan.
Well, hi folks, I'm Carey McDonald. I am a working parent, 3-term Malden City Councilor at Large, and a nonprofit executive, and I'm running to be your next state senator. I didn't always want to be a state senator growing up. I didn't start my year thinking I would be in this race, but when I saw that there was an open seat, it really matters that we have our next state senator be someone who's going to fight for our communities, who's going to represent our progressive and inclusive values, and who's going to be able to get things done for our communities. So my priorities in this campaign are first to fund our local schools and communities. I was very involved as the finance chair here in our override campaign, and what I learned through that narrow loss is that we need more help from the state, and I have not heard the urgency on Beacon Hill about this at all. We also need to make life more affordable. We don't just have a local government budget crisis, we have a crisis in affordability for so many working people and families. And we can do that in Massachusetts. We can do it by tackling the cost of utility bills and bringing those down with more clean energy, like we've done in Malden through Malden Community Electricity. We can do it by tackling costs of housing and childcare and healthcare as well. And I'm running because we have to fight back against a Trump administration that has it in for our communities. Our neighbors are being targeted every day on the streets. I know we'll talk about this later. But this is not going to get better anytime soon. It matters that we have leaders who will take the fight to the DC and protect our neighborhoods. And I'll be an advocate for transparency and openness and action and democracy. I support public records and audits and every way that we can hold our leaders accountable. So I'm really grateful to be here with you all and look forward to talking a lot more this evening.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for an important conversation. I'm Kate Lipper-Garabedian. I'm running to be your next state senator because I know I have the right values, the right experience, and a track record of delivering as both a city councilor and as a state representative for the city of Malden, the city of Melrose, and the town of Wakefield over the last 6 years. I'm so proud of the record that I've created with many of you in this area together, working collaboratively on the things that matter most in our communities to make it more affordable, more inclusive and livable for our kids growing up here all the way to our older adults. I know we are at a moment that's incredibly important to elect folks to our state house who are willing to stand strong against the cruelty and chaos of the Trump administration. And I'm so proud of the work the legislature has done here in Massachusetts to serve not only as a beacon of hope to folks here in the Commonwealth, but also those around the country. In this campaign, I've been thrilled to receive the endorsements of the current state senator, Jason Lewis, whose leadership has been tremendous for Malden and the rest of the district, as well as the full state delegation of Representatives Steve Altrino and Paul Donato here in Malden. I've also built a coalition of 35 elected local officials in every single community of the in the 5th Middlesex district, because I recognize how important that state-local partnership is, having been a local elected official myself. I'm hoping to earn your support and your vote as well on September 1st, and I'm really excited to get to talk tonight about transportation, access, complete streets, and climate resiliency, building a green future for our kids. So I'm looking forward to tonight. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Ryan O'Malley. I am running for 3 primary reasons. The first is public education. I approach it first as a municipal official here in Malden. I've been on the city council since 2016, 6 terms. And over those 6 terms, I've seen dwindling state aid and the impact it's had on our community and on the quality of our schools. We're just not getting the resources that we need from the state. Additionally, I approach it as a former Title I early reading intervention student. Because of the dedicated help of union teachers here in Malden, I was able to get it back on track very early on. And I eventually learned to read. I was able to go to Holy Cross for undergrad, and then I just recently graduated from BC Law, and I'm now an affordable housing attorney. Because education is the cornerstone of my campaign, I'm very proud and happy to have the endorsement of the Massachusetts Teachers Association, which is the largest teachers association in the Commonwealth, representing over 117,000 educators. Second is government accountability. My time on the City Council has been really about making sure that we follow the law where possible to the best of our ability. I'm not asking for everyone to be perfect, but we have to at least try. When I joined the Malden City Council, we didn't follow the open meeting law, we didn't follow the public records laws. We now do. I expect the state legislature to do the same. We're the only state that doesn't, and I think that's just atrocious. I also support the audit. I think that we really need to understand where is our money being spent. And the reason why I support the audit is because we need to make sure that we have the resources to educate our students and maintain our public assets, which gets me to my last reason for running. It's protecting public assets. I'm a former park ranger in the Middlesex Fells in Breakheart, and I've been protecting public assets for decades. So whether it's parks, schools, libraries, or our fiscal assets, it's essential that we defend them and we keep them quality so that we have the resources that we need as a community. September 1st is the primary. I'd really appreciate your vote. Thank you.
Thank you for those introductions, and I think we all look forward to diving deeper into some of the points you've all brought up throughout this evening. Tonight, we have 90 minutes to talk through questions about how these candidates would use their position in the Senate to shape issues related to transportation in Malden specifically, and more broadly in the district, which includes Malden, Melrose, Reading, Stoneham, Wakefield, and Winchester. As one of 40 state senators, this position is one with a significant amount of responsibility. On this topic of responsibility, the annual Fatal Crash Report, published by Walk, Massachusetts, begins with the following. In 2025, there were 354 reported total traffic deaths in Massachusetts. At least 76 pedestrians lost their lives as a result of traffic crashes, accounting for over 21% of the total. With that in mind, Vision Zero is a planning and policy framework which aims to eliminate all traffic deaths. Helsinki, Finland, with a population of 1.4 million, has shown that this is within reach, as they recorded 0 traffic deaths in between July of 2024 and 2025. Our first question tonight: do you believe the Commonwealth could ever have a year without any traffic fatalities? And how would you use your position in the Senate to bring the Commonwealth closer to this vision? We have 3 minutes for each candidate to answer this question, and we'll go in the opposite order, starting with Ryan, then Kate, then Carey.
Thank you. I do want to acknowledge that this is a very difficult time for the transit community. We lost Denise, and we lost Louisa, and these are unnecessary deaths. And I appreciate that we took a moment of silence in their memory. It also makes me think about one of my neighbors, Mary McTaggart, who lost her life in 2023 on Mountain Ave by a car crash. I'm sure many of you know more stories like this, and it's completely unnecessary, and I do believe we can get to a Vision Zero. I don't think that we're going to get there with over-policing and cameras and a surveillance state. I think we have to be designing our roads to match the expected behavior that we want. That's something that I have been doing here in the city of Malden. I have applied for numerous grants from Mass Trails. I've helped get projects on the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Plan, Shared Streets and Spaces, and I'm proud to be the lead sponsor of the Spot Pond Brook Greenway, which is also part of the Mystic Highlands Greenway, which will eventually connect to the Northern Strand to Lake Quannapowitt in Wakefield. So I believe investing in these great community improvements is how we make our community safer, so that if you're biking and walking, you don't have to do it directly next to a dangerous car. And if you have to take a car, you're driving on roads that are appropriate and make you drive a speed that is not going to maim or kill people. So I know I have 3 minutes, but I think that that's really it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm the mother of 2 school-aged boys, one in elementary school, one in middle school, and they're frequently biking around the city in which we live, walking to and from school. So I'm fully aware of how important it is for us to build streets that are safe for them and for folks of all mobilities and abilities. And I think as a state senator or a state legislator, there are two main levers in which we can support the important and critical leadership that's happening on the ground level with grassroots folks like you, grass tops, elected local officials, and they come down to money and to state frameworks and policies. And on the money, I've been so proud to be a champion of the Fair Share Amendment dollars, which we've been able to use to put into programs like the Complete Streets Grant Program, which we've seen coming right back here to Malden over multiple cycles to enable the city to better design streets for safer passageway by pedestrians and bicyclists and rollers. We also know that there are important laws that we need to pass to address accountability and safety. So I think, for example, of a bill that I supported that was signed into law just a few years ago to identify and define what a vulnerable rider is, to make sure that they are provided in state statute safe passing distances from vehicles, that they are also making sure that we are equipping any vehicle that is owned by or leased by the state to have critical safety investments in them. To answer the original question, yes, I think there is a way that we get to a point where we do not have fatalities by traffic because we can build the roads, we can create the driving culture that ensures that pedestrians and bicyclists like my kids and yours are feeling safe every day to access their schools, their jobs, and their way of life. I'm looking forward to continuing to work on that directly with the local leaders who can identify the places that are the pain points throughout our district and to think statewide as a Commonwealth about how we invest your tax dollars and make sure we're, again, creating that accountability framework in state law to make this possible.
I believe it's possible, and you have to believe it's possible to be able to work towards it being possible. But I think we have to think bigger than we have in the past. That starts with harm reduction, making it safer. I also think about my kids. They're like going over to their friend's house, and I don't want to have to think twice, can they go safely in this community, which is absolutely walkable? And so that includes traffic calming. I've fought for speed bumps here. I think we need way more of those kinds of things to just slow people down. This is like the number one safety issue I've heard in the city is I don't feel safe crossing the street. I remember being in an early meeting when Malden Safe Streets was formed before you were Malden Safe Streets and talking about how important it was to foreground safety. So I'm really proud that this group has done this. I think it's a real success. So that safety sensibility that we all deserve to be able to choose how we get where we need to go, even if we have mobility challenges, if we're older, if we're kids, that's the foundation of the values that I build on. I think that to get to that Vision Zero, which is a great policy framework, we don't just need traffic calming and better roads. We also need to think about how we develop and build our communities so that we have neighborhoods where you can go down to the store. I took my kids down to get their hair cut and walked. And there was a crosswalk, thankfully, but also people were speeding. So making sure that we're actually thinking about upstream, the zoning and the development that makes it possible to have a community like that, and far more transit usage. When we talk about Helsinki, that means, again, way more investment. We're going to talk about that in this forum. But I really believe that those kinds of visions are important. Last thing I'll just say is safety is a big issue in and of itself. We need way more education about helmets and safe driving. I would love to have helmet education in every phys ed class in school, because as much as my kids hear me say it, it would be great if they heard other adults say it as well. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your visions for the Commonwealth. Zooming into Malden in the 5th Middlesex, are there specific projects you would champion in the Senate to improve walking, biking, and rolling here? If each candidate could speak for 2 minutes, starting with Kate, then Carey, and finishing with Ryan.
So when I first moved to the district, I had a 1-year-old at the time, and the first thing I got involved in was actually the Complete Streets Working Group in Melrose, and was coming at it from a perspective of being a family with young children and thinking about how do we direct local grant dollars, state appropriation money, earmarks to projects that really matter. And so it requires, as you all know, a cross-section of different residents identifying priorities that really matter for stakeholders here. I brought that perspective of what do families with young kids with strollers need, or new bicyclists. And then most recently, as a vice chair of the Elder Affairs Committee, I think a lot about our older adults and how they're aging in place, and we want to make sure that they're able to navigate their lives and feel safe as they do it. So as a state senator, it's going to continue to be to press for the grant funding that we are providing to a city like Malden, which just got a $500,000 Complete Streets grant just this cycle and has now gotten more than $1.2 million, making sure that we're collaborating as a state delegation to support that kind of earmark money as well. I think as well, when we think about ways that we can improve streetscape infrastructure, create those things that matter. Let's think about the state roads that run through the 5th Middlesex, including here in Malden. That's where a state delegation is critically important. And I've been relentless with DCR in my district, making sure we're adding crosswalks, connecting sidewalks, adding guardrails, looking for more opportunities to create signaling and speed reminders for folks. That is a tough agency to crack, but I promise you don't have a stronger advocate in the state Senate who's going to stay relentless on that, to work really hard to make sure we're redesigning our state roads that go through this district, including Malden, in ways that make it safer for everyone here.
So I think we are doing a lot of things well about this in Massachusetts, and part of the challenge is don't let up. There are, I don't have to tell you all, a lot of people who hate bike lanes for reasons I truly do not understand. Bikes are great. And I was very proud to, I think 2 elections ago, be one of the candidates that the anti-bus, anti-bike lane people pulled an ad out in the newspaper against, because I support bike and bus lanes that we have in Malden. Because they work, because they keep people safe, and they help you get on the bus where you're going faster. And who rides the bus? This is such an equity issue, and I don't think we talk about that enough, because Malden certainly has high transit usage, and it's folks who are working, folks who are disabled, who are using our transit the most heavily and rely on it, and we have to make sure our systems work for our most vulnerable residents. So I think that in terms of improving walking, biking, and rolling in Malden, I think we just need more routes. Safe routes to school is a big one. I think we're going to talk about that, but we don't have busing, so again, kids need to get to school. I also think that the number of new types of electric vehicles, like personal electric vehicles, not just scooters, I think in one way is a win. More people are finding ways to get around that are affordable and accessible for them, but the safety concerns are real. So we just don't have enough space on all of the paths that we have right now. People are using the sidewalk for these scooters while they're also trying to walk. So I actually think we need more routes to say, this is where we would like micromobility to go. This is where it's fair and safe for you to go, rather than just kind of letting everybody sort it all out and then people feel like they're getting run off the road. Again, I just want to emphasize that the more we can normalize this with families and kids and people of all ages through routes and public education, the better. And just keep in mind who is most impacted whenever we are talking about the investments that we need to make in our community. Thank you.
So as was kind of alluded to and kind of connected on, the pain point that I've experienced as someone who's applied for all of these grants to make these improvements in a municipal level is the coordination with state agencies. So the primary driver that I would be doing, based on that experience of pulling my hair out trying to get these things to be changed, is making sure that the MBTA, MassDOT, and the DCR are actually coordinating and working as good partners with municipalities. If you don't have that coordination, it's almost impossible to get anything done, and it literally requires you having to call everyone, including the governor. That's just not how a state should operate, not a state like Massachusetts. So that's and it's not a criticism of any specific, elected official. It's just the fact that that is how our state is currently operating. And part of it is because they can hide behind what they're doing. And I think it's really important that we get rid of that dysfunction when it comes to transparency. I had mentioned, what projects. Obviously, there's the Spot Pond Brook Greenway, the Mystic Highlands Greenway, which will go all the way up to Wakefield. That would be my primary driver of what I want to see completed. But it wouldn't just be that. It would be, how do we make this interconnected to the Tri-Community Greenway, to the Wakefield-Linfield Greenway? How do we make it a truly interconnected network so that you can stay off a road if you want to and commute safely to school or commute safely to work, or just have a leisurely stroll on a shared use path separated from cars. I'm just going to go through all of the things. So we have Route 60, we have Route 28, we have the Fellsway. There are so many there are so many state roads that go through all of our communities, and if you just do piecemeal visions, community by community, it becomes very disjointed and dangerous. I think that needs to change. And my pie in the sky vision, I'm a hiker, former park ranger in the Fells. I can't stand that I hear 93 everywhere I am, and I would love to cap it and make wildlife overpasses so that we can really make the Fells a interconnected situation, and animals can cross 93 safely. Thank you.
Now let's talk about some money. Chapter 90 is the primary way the state funds municipal transportation infrastructure. For reference, last fiscal year, Malden was allocated approximately $1.2 million, and Melrose received approximately $750,000. While this money can technically be used for things beyond road repaving and maintenance, it rarely is due to the often crumbling condition of city streets. Do you think the state funding of Chapter 90 is adequate, or would you investigate increasing the allocation? Additionally, do you think there should be annual, consistent, dedicated state funding exclusively for bike and pedestrian infrastructure improvements? We'll give candidates 2 minutes each, starting with Carey, then Ryan, and finishing with Kate.
I do not think that Chapter 90 is enough money. Let me tell you what. In fact, in Malden, we've had to supplement this in the last couple of years until we had to stop because we have been having a local budget crisis just like all of our surrounding communities because of school funding and Prop 2.5, and I'm not doing that right now, but you know what I'm saying. And so we absolutely need more funding. This is part of the systematic disinvestment in infrastructure that has made so many things harder in the state of Massachusetts. So we have to fight for that. We have to tax corporations and billionaires to fight to make sure that our roads are paved and our sidewalks are safe and that people can get around their own communities. And heaven help you if you live on a private way. So I love this idea of, we should have additional dedicated funding that goes towards those pedestrian and biking and safety improvements. I would love to bring this together with the previous question about Vision Zero and allocate it based on where there are hot spots. We have such good data, of course, about where traffic accidents tend to happen. We know there's so much evidence about what interventions work, and so let's just fund them. If we want to bring down deaths and injuries, because so many types of injuries. I'm married to a case manager at a rehab hospital, and I hear about so many new ways that people have their lives completely altered by traffic accidents. If we want to do that, the stick and the carrot approach always works best with municipalities rather than just the stick approach. So I think there's a great way we could bring those together, prioritize equity investments with that additional funding, and really open up some possibilities that we would love to do, but I think have struggled with. We have 1 street, we're going on 2 with speed bumps. Imagine 5, imagine 50. That's all. That's the vision that I would hope to see with this kind of infrastructure and support.
Yes, I also agree that Chapter 90 funding needs to be increased. The challenge that we have here in Malden is that many people think that roads were built by the city, but oftentimes roads are actually built by private developers who develop a neighborhood. And we have city standards that are maintained by our Public Works Commission and enforced by our city engineer. And so if you have like a development like Rose Quarry or Granada Highlands, et cetera, and they build their roads, if they don't build them to city standards, we can't accept them. Those unaccepted roads don't count towards our Chapter 90 funding. It's based on a per mile basis of roads in your community. And so because developers were not being held accountable and they weren't building them to city standards, Malden has one of the highest amount of unaccepted roads in the Commonwealth. But this is a challenge that's facing all the communities in the district. So we need to make sure that we're getting the resources of cities and towns to improve those roads and bring them up to city standards or town standards. I think I'm the only candidate up here that has applied for probably all the grants, whether it's Mass Trails, Complete Streets, Shared Streets and Spaces. So I know the pain points, and I think that those funding sources need to be streamlined so it's easier to get the funding, but it also needs to be increased. So I think just willy-nilly giving additional funding might be dangerous, but I think if you tie it to Complete Streets so that you're actually getting safer roads and not just, more pedestrian things that you can qualify as pedestrian but don't actually make the streets safer, I think is essential. So I'd support increasing the budget for Complete Streets.
So I'm a former municipal employee. I was a public school teacher. I've also been a city councilor. And in my 6 years as a state rep, when I go before leadership and talk about what are my top Commonwealth-wide and district-wide priorities, it's always getting money back to the cities and towns that I represent because they know where the need is. And I recognize that a local dollar spent reinforces for folks that government is working for them, and that's why I have served in elected office. The Chapter 90 program is a great success story insofar as we've been able to increase it in recent years by 50%, and that's because of the progressive tax effort that I supported and championed, the Fair Share Amendment. It is based on the amount of mileage that is in a city or town as well as the population, and we've been able to increase that overall pot by 50%. Also within Chapter 90, we've been creating sustainable funding streams for the Complete Streets Grant Program that we've all talked about, as well as a municipal paving program that's at $65 million for the current fiscal year. These are dollars that are critically important, and yes, we absolutely can do more. We will continue to work hard at that, and as someone in the legislature, I have really championed this kind of funding. You'll see from the fiscal year 27 budget that we just passed, the second largest amount of money in terms of policy orientation that we are funding as a state is local government, getting money back to municipalities. The number one is healthcare, and that's largely non-discretionary. So you do see folks like me and other colleagues who recognize how important it is to have strong local partnerships, which is why I'm so proud to have 35 select board members, city councilors, school committee members, so town councilors across this district supporting this campaign.
The MBTA is a critical component of our regional transportation infrastructure. Over the last 2 decades, however, state funding has often been insufficient, and year after year, we rehash conversations about funding gaps and temporary fixes. What actions would you take to ensure the MBTA has adequate and predictable funding in the long term? We'll give candidates 2 minutes each, starting with Kate, then Ryan, and finishing with Carey.
So I'm really jazzed about this question because the 5th Middlesex, something that is key and a gem to us is our access to transit. We have 10 train stations across the district, and I've been pleased every week to be out at one of them meeting commuters, meeting residents to learn more about what they need, what they love, where we can do better, including the bus lines that are servicing the district as well. I've been at bus stops as well. I look at our fiscal year 27 budget. If you add on the fair share dollars, the state is now going to be investing over $1 billion in this fiscal year alone in the MBTA itself. And what does that look like? It looks like when Harrison and Oscar and I went down to see the tall ships last week, we went orange line to red line to silver line. Final review, the orange line is the best, is what they said. We've got a fully new fleet of cars, we have no slow zones, and we've got a GM who is laser focused on delivering accessible, affordable rides. I'm proud to be part of a legislature that stood up and is funding the low fare income eligible ride that GM Inc. came right here to Malden to break the ribbon on and celebrate. Was proud to stand with him on that, continue to forward, fund that. There's always more we can do to improve quality, to learn from you all as well, but I'm really proud of the track record over the last several years and really leaning into this. It's going to be so important for the 5th Middlesex. It will remain a priority for me as your state senator.
So I've been a MBTA user and transit rider since the days that the Orange Line was catching on fire and people were jumping in the Mystic River. It was rough, it was scary, but I will have to agree that the general manager Eng has really done an amazing job turning around the MBTA. I'm a daily user. I commute into Boston, and the Orange Line is definitely the best line. It has improved significantly. I think a crucial part of this is increasing ridership and making it as efficient and as convenient as possible. I think that part of that is fares. But I think that the vision should be a fare free system so that you have more ridership and you have more economic development. This is a public good. It shouldn't have to necessarily make money. So I would support a fare free system in order to encourage the more ridership and more economic development along the train, get people off the roads into transit. But how do you pay for that? I'm not afraid to say that I believe that regressive taxes are not fair, and we need to have a more progressive income tax system. It could be a progressive income tax, but I've also recently learned by going to progressive networking events that there's also a progressive wage tax. So there are ways in which you can raise revenue so that those who make more pay more and those who don't make more pay less. It's the only fair way to do this. So I think that we can raise revenue in a progressive manner and invest it into transit and education so that we have the highest quality transit and education in the country. Thank you.
The tea is so much better, y'all. It really is. And a lot of credit to the general manager and to the infrastructure investment and catch up. And yeah, the Fair Share Amendment was a big part of that. I was out knocking on doors. I bet a bunch of you were too, to try to make sure that passed. And it was close, you may remember. It was actually not that long ago that the Orange Line was catching on fire and people were jumping into the river. So I think that's a good example of what it looks like to begin to catch up from the decades of disinvestment that have been a part of the story of our communities. And we are not where we need to go yet, but I think stability is key, absolutely. I would posit that the success of the World Cup, where the T was able to remake the station at Foxborough in 10 months, and yet when I think the Winchester commuter rail station was redone, and that's where our state senator lived, it took like 10 years. Like, we still have a ways to go to make it so that this transit system is truly accessible for all of our people and is giving folks the choice that they want and is helping people get to work at the hours that they actually work. I would say the bus network redesign was a bit of a wash for Malden. Some things got better, some things didn't get better. Malden needs more crosstown service. Stoneham doesn't have any crosstown service. And the lack of support for certain communities in the district from buses, Malden has it better than many. But this is a real way that people have to get around. And so I would love the vision of a fare free system. And because that's not going to happen tomorrow, we have to think about, well, where do we prioritize the next thing we're going to do? And I think that has to start with more of the fare-free bus routes and ways that we streamline that kind of access in our highest need, highest use corridors. That's going to make buses faster. It's going to help them get there on time. We still have bunching issues, which anyone who has taken a bus down Salem Street can tell you. And that's a big part of the kinds of equity investments that we need to continue to make as we catch up to the investment we need to make our communities strong.
Thank you for all of your responses to the questions so far. We'll now kind of shift into some community questions to hear different perspectives from all across Malden and the district. To complement the previous question and to support the regional focus of this forum, we now have a member of Melrose's Pedestrian Bike Committee, Walker Robbins. Take it away.
All righty, greetings from the north. So this will dovetail pretty nicely with all of your responses on the previous questions. So over the last several years, Melrose has done a lot of work to try to make good on the state's commitment to achieving climate goals, housing production goals, by focusing on transit-oriented development. Lots of stuff being built right now. At the same time, transit access has not exactly increased. In some ways, you mentioned the bus route redesign, it has actually declined in Melrose and other spots north of Malden Center. So our question, and again, y'all kind of touched on this already, but is what is your vision for what a good transit system throughout the district, like what does that actually look like? And how could you go about realizing it as a state senator? Thank you.
We'll give candidates 2 minutes each, starting with Kate, then Carey, and finishing with Ryan.
So as a state representative, I've been really focused on how we preserve and also expand access to public transit, including during a pandemic. I was elected as the first COVID representative in March 2020, and there were a lot of draconian cuts that were proposed for the T, including completely closing one of the commuter rail stops in the 5th Middlesex. I led the charge to push back on that because I know once something gets taken away, it's incredibly difficult to bring it back. And we were successful in keeping that station open, and it's still functioning today. I also looked a couple summers ago when they were going to reduce service because of track repairs, which are incredible that we've gotten that done, but they were going to cut off the one train that worked for working parents to get their kids to school or to camp and then get into Boston. Push back on that, we were able to figure out a way to keep that line going and not even reduce or lengthen the time that the construction took. The Better Bus redesign, which was mentioned recently, that's an interesting approach where we're not only thinking about corridors into and out of Boston, but how are we connecting communities? And there is a bus line plan that is going to provide Stoneham with better continuity in neighboring communities. I want to see more of that. I want to see more of the service coming back online with buses included, certainly as your next state senator. I also think microtransit is a really interesting concept. Stoneham is actually exploring that in a pilot program that they're running, the town, to sort of allow people to call and get picked up in vans to get where they need to go. We should explore that further, both at a local level, but perhaps at a regional level as well. Being mindful of organized labor having a seat at the table, I do have the Carmen's endorsement, so I want to make sure that working families are able to talk about how they're going to play a role in expanding our transit options. But it's critically important that we don't accept the status quo, that we keep pushing really hard to increase access, because you're right, communities here in the 5th Middlesex, like Melrose, like Malden, are doing their fair share, if not more, to build transit-oriented housing to bring down the cost. It's the primary driver of our affordability crisis, and the state then needs to help facilitate, connect communities together to make sure that we are providing that infrastructure of transportation that's necessary.
I want to say something that's maybe radical, which is that I actually don't think it should be up to the state. I think it should be up to you and to us. And one of the hardest things about the T, which they have a hard job. It's a lot. I get it. I have sympathy. And it is very difficult to get the T to sit down and listen to you and get some things done that seem very possible. I have been in all kinds of advocacy meetings about all kinds of issues, but they can be as simple as trying to get a bus stop across from the senior building in place so that people don't have to wait in the sunlight for 20 minutes to catch the bus when they're like 80 years old. And so I think that the kind of future that we want to have for this community has to be designed with local communities and local advocates having a seat at the table. As a state senator, you have incredible power to raise issues and to convene. It's not just the votes that you take or whatever you sponsor, though that's incredibly important and we should be accountable for that, and you should know what it is. But it is about the ability to build coalitions that get things done, and that means having way more conversation with the advocates about the detailed impacts of what happens when you shift one bus line or the timing of that. I really believe in buses. Like, they are the workhorses of the system in so many ways. They help people who can't, it takes $1 billion to move a train, and that's important, and we should continue to invest in that. But buses can help people get where they need to go fast. Creative approaches to bus routes. It should not take an hour to get across the district as it is right now. So I would love to see more creative approaches that are community-driven to the bus service, making sure we're prioritizing, again, those equity investments. And that's really what I would push for, not just the vision, but the fact that you have a seat at the table in determining that if I am your state senator.
Having grown up here, I've been biking these roads for my entire life. And I kind of know the touch points, the places that are dangerous. And I'm also a student of history, and I know that we have less public transit now than we did in the 1800s. Most of the bus lines were based on old trolley lines. Any windy road in the city, whether it's the Fells Way or even Main Street or Lebanon Street, was originally a trolley line. And so I believe that we need to really look at how do we reestablish these public transit networks. I mentioned I was a former park ranger. In the Middlesex Fells, there's an old abandoned trolley bridge. I think there's ways in which to bring this back and really bring more equitable transportation throughout the district. I helped bring, and we talked about the better bus network. I was on the front lines there, writing letters to the T, saying that you need to do more disparate impact studies about what is the impact going to have on low-income families, seniors, people who don't have licenses, and I was able to help restore some bus lines in Malden and beyond because of that. Many that went through Melrose. I also helped bring ride share to bike share to Malden. I brought OFO and Lime Bike here originally. It was a mixed bag, but it helped build the foundation so that we could have blue bikes. So I think rolling out the blue bike network for that last half-mile transit or quarter-mile transit is going to be essential. And again, I'm going to go to that was the things that we can accomplish very easily. Medium term, electrification of the commuter rail and getting rid of any single tracks, making sure it's double track so you aren't wasting time and you can get more trains going in and out. And the pie in the sky, a circle line. I used to live in London, and I would love to see all the terminuses connected, starting in Revere, Lynn, Oak Grove, Alewife, Newton, JP, Mattapan, Braintree, Quincy.
All right, thank you. I'd now like to invite to the mic Lisa Picardi, a member of Malden's Disability Commission, to ask a question about increasing accessibility.
Hello. How do we get this? Okay. Good evening. Thank you for coming.
Good evening.
People with disabilities have transportation disadvantages. Inaccessibility in ground transportation forces millions of us to rely on paratransit like the ride and restrict travel or stay home entirely due to the unsafe roads and sidewalks. Key challenges include severe lack of paratransit, like the inner-city buses and trains and things, just in Malden itself, not in all the other cities. And for services for people that need assistance and accessibilities for those services for people who need them, and poor infrastructure, like, it's crazy. Each day could bring new challenges for us, especially during the winter months, with getting from one place to another in the city. How would you lobby, like what would be your approaches on how you would lobby and support the funding for new infrastructure and adaptive systems to improve accessibility for all of us?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. We will give candidates 3 minutes each, starting with Ryan, and then Carey, and then finishing with Kate.
Yeah, so I think that being able to move around your community is essential. It's as essential as like turning on the lights. If you can't get to your doctor, if you can't buy food, if you can't, how do you survive? It's impossible. And people shouldn't have to stay in their homes and receive services only at home. I think that making sure that we can free people to leave their homes and enjoy their lives and spend time with their friends and recreate is important. I believe improving the ride is essential. This is a lifeline for so many people in our community. But it can't just be the ride. I was very proud, as I've mentioned many times, and I apologize. The Spot Pond Brook Greenway is my baby, and I want to make sure it gets built. And it was really sad to see the administration here in Malden and many others undo and get rid of a huge section on Canal Street that would have provided a essential transit connection for people with disabilities and mobility restrictions. Unfortunately, that was cut. If I am your next state senator, I would be fully funding and expanding funding for Complete Streets with the specific goal of targeted interventions in circumstances like that. Our community knows where those pain points are. All of the communities in the 5th Middlesex know where those pain points are. We just need to get them the funding. And Complete Streets is the way to do it, so that they have to build it in a way that actually takes every and all users in mind. Community Development Block Grant. I've been proud to support record funding to improve sidewalks. And so, yeah, I think I have proven myself on the City Council, and I would do the same at the state, and I'd be a great partner at that level. Thank you.
I'm sorry, am I next?
Sorry. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Lisa. We have such an excellent disability commission here in Malden. I just think it's a model for how to prioritize and get things really done, and shows how important it is that whenever we're talking about these kind of key investments that impact disproportionately certain parts of communities, there's nothing for us without us, right? That's a motto from organizing. There's nothing for us without us, but making sure that we are working so tightly with our advocates and our impacted communities is absolutely central to how I would approach all these things as a state senator. I do think that paratransit is, I agree, it's a lifeline. And if we're talking about a fare free system, that would be a great place to start, but that can't come at the cost of disinvestment in the service itself. And so we need more access there and funding there. We also just need a better basic system so that, there are more options. And if you live close enough and that timing works for you, that you can actually take the bus or take the train. And the importance of that self-determination and that agency really just can't be overstated. But when a system doesn't work, it doesn't work for the people who have the least amount of power, money, access, influence. And so this really is such an equity, and it's an excellence issue that is an equity issue. It has to work well, because otherwise you are just sitting there waiting for the ride. So I think that we can achieve the kind of universal design that means that it's better for everyone. I see that with sidewalks because when you have better curb cuts, it's not just better for folks who have mobility challenges, better for people with scooters and people who have strollers and are taking their carts home from the grocery store full of groceries. So I think there's the transit piece of this, but there's just the built environment and staying on top of those things. I think I've really learned as a city councilor is how when you get behind on infrastructure, it is more expensive to catch up. You know, if you're talking about the sidewalk, you can't just patch it. You got to rip the whole thing up and replace it. So the importance of staying on top of our infrastructure investment has not been something we've ever thought is possible in the last generation. But I think that's where we have to get, and that's what will allow us to stay on top of just the basic built environment, those sidewalks and crosswalks, that'll help people get to other transportation options, in addition to investing heavily in the direct paratransit that serves our disabled community, as well as the collaboration with advocates about what they would like to see and what is going to be the most important next thing to fund.
Yeah, I want to underscore that concept of universal design. It's something that I was familiar with as a teacher, including for special education students, and then as an education attorney, really thinking about special education law and compliance and pushing Massachusetts forward, including in some of the work that I've done in the State House. And it's absolutely the case that when we build systems that are universally accessible for everyone, everyone wins. So as a state legislator, I have been unequivocal in continuing to support investments in the ride and our paratransit and continue to expand that. Just last week, in a bill that was somewhat unrelated about pets, we made sure that moving forward, those who need service animals when they travel cannot be discriminated against when they're getting a ride somewhere. That's so important, right? And we want to be thinking about accessibility in any type of policy making that we're doing. I also want to think about an example where accessibility became really relevant for me in my district with, a bunch of different inaccessible commuter rail stops. And so I reached out to the MBTA, and they were pretty responsive and sort of saying, well, we don't think we can build an entire platform right now. It's really too expensive. I said, well, what about these mini high platforms that you see in some places, like in the Highlands and Melrose or up in Reading? And they said, well, we don't think we can do that right now. The federal rules have changed. I said, well, let's chase that down and find out. So what did we do? Together, we worked to reach out to the congressional delegation to understand what the regulations looked like and what the policies were, and was there room to negotiate or maneuver or reach a different conclusion. And now the T, with many people at the table, but certainly my voice among them, has reinstituted installing mini high platforms across the network, and one is coming to Melrose this very year. So that's an example of where I want to hear from folks at the local level about where your pain points are. I want to be a conduit for you to talk to the state agencies that have the funding, the authority to make that happen, and to make sure we're leaning on every lever that we can, because it matters not just for you and your family, it matters for all of our families. And I'm mindful of that, from the youngest students to the older adults who are, their mobility is going to become slower. I talked to someone in Stone just the other day who said, I'm really hopeful that when I can't really access, places in my car or by foot anymore, the bus redesign will really have come online and I'll be able to use that to get where I want to go. So this is something that we're going to have to keep leaning in on together, working in partnership, and I think there's a lot of progress and much more to come.
Thank you. And now I'd like to invite Sonia, an educator and walking bus driver, helping our students and school children get to school safely.
Hi, thank you all for coming. So safe streets these days mean more than public transportation and sidewalks without cracks. We've seen the impact and fear that the presence of ICE has on our neighborhoods, our streets, and especially with our families. Something as everyday as going to school or picking up your child is now a much bigger source of concern for families in our communities, and particularly for Haitian immigrants following the end of TPS. Malden Safe Streets has been instrumental in supporting parents, community members, and educators with these efforts. How do you propose supporting our families, as well as local organizations and educators, to ensure that our students can get to school safely?
We'll give candidates 2 minutes each, starting with Carey, then Kate, then Ryan.
Thank you, Sonia, for this question and for all your work on the walking bus. And I was part of the team that got the walking bus plan started in Malden, because I want to be really clear on this point. As your state senator, I will not flinch from doing every single thing we can to protect our immigrant neighbors who are being targeted by the Trump administration right now. I watched a deportation happen on my street of a parent taking their kid to school, leaving a first grader on the sidewalk. Thankfully, we were able to rely on some of the immigrant-led organizations that are already strong in this community, like LUCE, of which I've been an active member since it was formed, This is a campaign to terrorize our communities, to get people to leave instead of building a life here, people who bring their passion and their work and their care for our community. We've seen our student population go down, like many districts, because there is such fear, and we cannot stand for it, and we have to have leaders who are going to take the fight to DC. I am suing Donald Trump in my day job. I think I'm the only candidate in this race that is actively suing Donald Trump about this very issue, which is where can ICE enforce? For years, they could not enforce in sensitive locations like schools, hospitals, clinics, churches. And that was repealed, of course, day one of the Trump administration. This is an area where the legislature is finally taking some action, and my only question is, why didn't we do it 6 months ago, a year ago? Try to make it impossible to do civil enforcement in these sensitive locations so people can go to court, so they can go to the doctor, so they can go to school. This is un-American, it is wrong, and I promise you, you will not have a state senator who fights stronger on this issue than me in the entire Commonwealth.
So as a mother, it is unimaginable to me that I could walk my children to school and then not see them again. As a former teacher, it is heartbreaking to imagine at school dismissal watching my kids exit a building and look without, into the, abyss and not see someone there to pick them up. It is unconscionable. The cruelty and the chaos coming out of DC is just apoplectic. I'm apoplectic about it. And what I am proud to have done as a state legislature is to stand with my legislative colleagues in the Black and Latino Legislative Caucus to allow their voices to be elevated, the folks that they represent and that they care deeply about, to let them lead on the PROTECT Act, which I was proud to vote for. I'm confident we are going to get that to the governor's desk. In my 6 years in the State House, we have passed the Work and Family Mobility Act to allow undocumented immigrants here in Massachusetts to get driver's licenses so that they can safely access the places that they need to go with their families. I was proud to make sure that we protect our immigrant and English language learners with the access to the resources that they need in the school. And in the House last year, we created an entirely new line item about legal defense for our immigrants here in Massachusetts at $5 million. In the current state budget that we just enacted, we've increased it to $8 million. I'm unequivocal on this. I will listen and lean in with you, with the folks who are directly impacted. I'm elevating immigrant voice in things like my community conversation that I did this year about Trump's impact on our immigrant communities. This is something that is unequivocal for me. It is not, theoretical. People right here, as we've heard in Malden alone, have been disappeared. It is inhumane. We will stand together. We will show the world and the country there is a different way to do things here.
So this is a very tough conversation for me. It's very personal for me. I have close family members who are immigrants, and to see what's going on is really heartbreaking. We've lost, legal immigrants who have been murdered just because of their national origin and because of racial profiling. It's unacceptable. I have worked diligently, both in the front as well as behind the scenes, to make sure that we in Malden are prepared for a potential surge or being prepared for what the actual surge that is happening now that you might not see. So when we heard what was going on in Minneapolis, I called our police chief and said, what will you do if masked people come to our community and commit crimes? Are you prepared to arrest people who are committing crimes? I've talked to DA Marion Ryan to ask her, will you charge people who are committing crimes in our community? I believe that the fact that we haven't seen the same level of surge is because of those conversations. It can't just be about news clips in public. It has to be about doing the work behind the scenes, the quiet work. I will never use immigrants and tokenize immigrants to get to the next step, but I will always defend immigrants each and every day.
Thank you. I will speak for myself, but I think a significant motivation for many individuals to get involved in transportation work is connected to the environmental impacts of a car-centric system. Beyond the significant carbon emissions, excessive pavement leads to flooding and chemical runoffs into rivers like the Malden River, and tire particulates fill the air we breathe. Tonight, we are partnering with the Friends of the Malden River to take some time to understand how you, the candidates, will work to improve the quality of access, cleanliness, and climate resilience of the Mystic River watershed and the Malden River. I'd like to invite Judy Dugan, a friend of the Malden River, to ask the next two questions.
Sorry. I think I have the longest question here, so bear with me. So, health professionals often point to the benefits of exercising and walking as a means of promoting good health and longevity. The Mystic Greenway program has promoted paths along the Mystic and Malden rivers, yet there is still much work to be done to connect existing pathways and create new ones. Experience has shown that getting privately owned property owners to commit to building and maintaining legally required paths and access along the Malden River has been extremely difficult. What do you propose in your possible role as the state senator to convince these owners to build and maintain these new and connecting pathways?
We'll take 3 minutes for each candidate, starting with Ryan, and then Carey, and then Kate.
This is like my love language. Thank you so much for asking this question. I helped develop the Mystic River and Malden River Greenway plans with the Mystic River Watershed Association, Amber Christofferson, and the Friends of the Malden River, many of who are here in this room today. Nothing is done alone by one individual. It's done by advocacy by all of us in this room, and it's something that I've also been frustrated about. I helped write the ordinance to require a setback from the Malden River so that we would have space to build these new shared use paths. But it hasn't resulted in the paths that we deserve. So I believe that we need to strengthen ordinances locally, and I would be a good partner there. But I also believe that we need to strengthen Chapter 91. Chapter 91 is what preserves the public's right of access to tidal waterways. I believe that in addition to that, expanding the amount of required space and amenities are needed, but also expand that to freshwater. Things that have been separated. So for instance, Chapter 91 ends at a roadway that bisects a waterway. I believe it should go on. So for instance, in Malden, that's Charles Street. We can't get any more Chapter 91 compliance north of Charles Street because of Charles Street. I think that there are loopholes that we can eliminate, and that would be a state legislative action that I would look forward to propose. I believe we need development triggers so that when people are resurfacing their parking lots, they don't get to just pave right up to the river. They have to provide that public access. They have to plant trees. They have to provide benches. They have to provide public parking. It is our public resource. They would not have land to build on if we didn't dam the Mystic River with the Amelia Earhart Dam. Their private property exists because of public investment in the Mystic River. That is why we deserve access to tidelands. Finally, I would be a great partner with DEP to make sure that the path at National Grid on the Malden River is finally built. If it takes having to pass a law or pass a new regulation, I will be there each and every day the same way I've been here locally. But it's not just the Malden River. There's the Aberjona, there's Lake Quantapowhat in Wakefield. This is something that actually really connects all of our communities, watersheds. And so people might think that Malden is very different than Wakefield or different than Winchester, but it's not true. We're all part of the same watershed.
I really appreciate how much our community advocates have built up the vision for the Friends of the Malden River and the path along the river. And it's going to be a transformative investment for this community because it's going to open up access to so many more people. We've just started that with the anchor investment of the Malden River Works project, which I've been very happy to support, of course. But I think that to really move the needle on this, and I've talked with Karen Buck many times about this. I think we have to get some momentum going on development in that area so that we can have both a carrot and a stick approach. It's just really hard to get people who have large industrial properties with big parking lots to convince them one way or another to put in a significant pedestrian path. And even though we've required a bunch of things and we ticket them, what we're trying to do is transform that area, we need a transformative approach. That means a big picture aspiration for the city that says this is what it could be. Advocates have already built this vision, but we have to commit. We started to loosen up zoning in that corridor so that more development is possible. But when development is possible is really not just, fixing a building or infrastructure, but really big picture redevelopment. That's when this kind of an approach becomes possible. That's what I'd really like to see. And I think we really need partners at the state who are going to help push for that, who are going to help make the key investments and grants happen when you need. I think this path could be a great candidate for an investment like that. That's part of what made the Malden River Works project possible. Was key earmarks at key times. And so I just think here, again, we got to think bigger, we got to commit to the vision, and we really got to make sure that there's that tight alignment between sticks and carrots to make sure that everybody is moving in the same direction. And I would be very honored to be a part of that leadership at the next level.
So I want to applaud Malden River Works for the tremendous success that this program has been. And I also want to flag that I remember meeting Councilor O'Malley at one of the ribbon cuttings for Mystic Greenways program. Like, I know that that's one of the first places we ever met. These are great examples where local advocates, stakeholders, experts, and leaders are really coming together and coalescing around a vision that's going to be not only important for that immediate location, but serve as a best practice for the rest of the district. And as a member of the Malden State Delegation, I've been proud to support more than $3.5 million in grants going into this project, and we're certainly not satisfied. We've gotten another $100,000 in the most recent budget as an earmark as well, and we'll keep looking for opportunities to invest. You know, as a state senator representing a large region, I think my role is really to continue to build those connections to folks on the ground level who know the topography best, who are experts at what is definitely needed, and then to use my bully pulpit to really push for that, to build coalition among state leadership, among state agencies that have grant-making authority or authorizing authority, to work with the local elected officials with whom I have excellent partnerships to make sure we are identifying ways in which where the levers are to push things forward. A lot of this, as you've heard, is maybe about local flexibility and innovation, but there is a role for the state to play in coming behind to support it with financial, ability, with a strong voice of advocacy, thinking about outside stakeholders like organized labor. Are these union projects that we can bring in? Because if so, that's a strong voice at the table to really push private developers to think about a bigger vision, a better vision for what's next.
Question number 2. The Malden River Works project is one small example of an effort to protect municipal infrastructure during times of extreme weather, including flooding. Malden's DPW yards are now better positioned to withstand extreme flooding because of community activism and vision. What are you prepared to offer our communities to address similar needs in all of the communities represented in this Senate district?
We'll take 2 minutes per candidate for this question, starting with Carey, and then Kate, and then Ryan.
Climate action has been a passion of mine since I first ran for office. It was the top of my literature that year, and it's one of the things I'm proudest of having made real progress on as a city councilor. We now have a climate action plan that is grounded in both reducing greenhouse emissions and climate resiliency, making sure that our community is ready for rising temperatures and worsening storms. So a big part of that is water, right? It's storm runoff and flood management, and that's as well as groundwater and storm surge. We're talking about both of those things here. So that's in Malden, but other communities have also been investing in that kind of local leadership around climate action. That's really exciting. Melrose has definitely been a leader, and when I first got elected, I went and talked to Melrose's sustainability coordinator, because we didn't have one yet, so that she could tell me some of the things that she's learned. So I think in terms of what we really need for that kind of community resilience, specifically about water, because I also think there's air quality issues that need to attending to, heat island issues, but specifically about water, the two gates that prevent flood surge in our part of the metro area are the Amelia Earhart Dam. I sponsored a paper just this spring about making sure that we are investing in raising that dam so that as the sea level rises over time, even though we don't want it to rise as fast as it is, the dam will hold and protect hundreds of thousands of people across this district and the next one. The other part from Malden is the Town Line Brook Gate, which is on the east side of the city. So that also needs some attention. But every community has ponds and rivers and lakes that need this kind of attention to flooding, stormwater management, often very old stormwater and drain and sewer systems that we have to be making the investments now before it is too late and we have catastrophic flooding. That's the kind of forethought that I think we can do when we work together on climate action and climate resiliency. Just one other thing, I testified for the Make Polluters Pay bill, which creates a super fund for fossil fuel companies who can then use that money to fund these kinds of improvements in our community. So there are funding mechanisms.
So I don't have to tell anyone in this room or Atria, wherever we are, that the climate crisis is real. It's not theoretical, it's existential. We saw it, as recently as the wildfires in Canada invading our airways in the last couple of weeks. I'm really proud in this campaign to have received the endorsement of the Environmental League of Massachusetts. It's the prominent sort of advocacy organization on environmental issues at the state level, and really proud also to be named as Keep Massachusetts Beautiful's 2005 Legislator of the Year. And I think I've earned those endorsements because of the work that I've done both as a city councilor originally and as a state representative, leaning into and prioritizing infrastructure and response to our climate crisis. Most recently, I'm really pleased that the House Environmental Bond Bill creates a new authorization for a new revolving fund to help municipalities with infrastructure that relates to resilience and to technical assistance. It's really important for a place like Malden that's already leading on that, and to the other communities in the 5th Middlesex. We're also going to create commissions that focus specifically on what you've asked about, which is flood mitigation, but also commissions on air quality, on coastal resilience, and long-term climate preparedness. One thing that I think has been so wonderful about being a state rep, and that I'd love to continue to do as a state senator, is be a continuous student. I am constantly learning when I'm on the job. So when I came to go to the ribbon cutting for the urban pocket forest here in Malden, the first of its kind, the tree warden was maybe annoyed or maybe excited by all of my questions, and I wanted to know more about this permeable surface and what does it mean and how are we catching runoff. And then as soon as I learn more, I'm connecting him to the DPW in Wakefield and the DPW in Melrose, because we need to share best practices across this district, across the Commonwealth, keep leaning in on the expertise that we have here. And so that's another example where it starts local and it can grow to be global.
I think a couple of things I would provide is, one, it's like the technical expertise that I've developed as a park ranger, but also the community organizing skills that I've helped develop. I have helped catalyze with community groups so many of the things that we care about in our community. Organizing around the Malden River. I hosted in my backyard one of our first kickoffs to really kind of organize around how do we advocate for the Malden River so that we can get more public spaces along our river, which has turned into the Malden River Works project. At the time, we were trying to get the National Grid site near Malden Center to be a park because it's so contaminated. We were hoping we could use phytoremediation trees to help suck up the toxins, and that's another site like the DPW that's very contaminated. So organizational structuring, community organizing is so essential to really having that long-term vision to get it over the hill. But I believe it's very essential that it's not just about me or any of us up here. It's about really elevating the community voices, marginalized voices who are directly impacted. So many of our communities have environmental justice communities that are impacted directly by lack of investment and over industrialization and the impacts of that. And it's really kind of focused on climate change, and that's what's causing the flooding and the storm surges, which is why we have Malden River Works and other elevated parks. I'm very proud to have brought the consultant to Malden that helped us get energy aggregation and community electricity in our community. That's helped bring down costs, and I think a similar thing throughout the district and the Commonwealth is essential. In addition to that, obviously funding for that, conservation is essential. I worked with community groups in Wakefield to try to preserve Breakheart and forest that was impacted by the Volk construction and mountaintop removal. And so the last thing, working with the Malden River Works team, we were able to build a really great new rain garden at Quarterly Park with students from Malden High School. So I'm not afraid to get my hands dirty, and I look forward to doing that throughout the district.
Thank you again to the Friends of the Malden River for all their efforts to improve the Malden River and community access to our great waterway. For the last part of the evening, we will now move into a lightning round portion where candidates will have 30 seconds each to give quick, high-level responses to a few questions. For all of these lightning round questions, we'll start with Carey and Kate and then Ryan, just to keep it simple. Starting off, there is currently a 20-cent fee on all rideshare rides, half of which goes to the state and half to municipalities. In Malden, this generated approximately $125,000 to be used to mitigate the impacts of rideshares on the transportation network. There has recently been some discussion of expanding this fee to meal delivery services like Uber Eats and DoorDash, to further the impact of this program. Would you support this measure?
Yeah, very open to that. We've used it for some transformative projects like the cross street repaving and redo. So it's been a great funding source, and I think that's positive. I would just want to make sure this is part of the collective bargaining that's happening with rideshare drivers. I did support the right of rideshare drivers to unionize, and they're in contract negotiations right now. So just want to make sure that's a part of those negotiations.
I'm going to say ditto.
So I think that we have to be careful of regressive taxes. You heard me talk earlier about progressive taxation. So fees and these taxes that impact these type of uses disproportionately impact low-income people. So we have to be careful of that. So I think that if it's someone who has a disability and can't leave the home, I think that that fee should be waived for people who are using this service in order to get meals because they can't get out of the house. But if you have those type of protections, I think that I am a cautious yes here. I think there are more progressive ways to get revenue, but I think if we protect marginalized and people who are impacted disproportionately by these fees, I think there's a way to do it.
Efforts to clean existing waterways, the Mystic and the Malden and Aberdeen rivers, among others, are repeatedly compromised by combined sewer overflows dumping raw sewage into these bodies. Would you be committed to promoting and funding an end to this practice?
I don't know that anything's grosser than combined sewer overflows. Yes, and these are billion-dollar projects often, and so we have to commit to that vision and also in the short-term work to mitigate the problems, better testing, better enforcement and notification, and managing stormwater runoff through things like permeable pavement and diversion so that we're not making the problem worse in the meantime.
I'll slightly change it up. I'll say yes, I absolutely support this, and look no further than what happened in the Merrimack Valley over the July 4th weekend. I mean, it's unimaginable. We have to have all hands on deck to think about short-term, medium-term, and long-term solutions here.
So for those who don't know, a combined sewer overflow is when sewage mixes with rainwater. And so when it rains, all of the sewage is overflowing into our rivers and onto our beaches. So as someone who used to work at Nahant, never swim after a rain. Wait a couple days for sure, because you are swimming in sewage. So absolutely, we need to end that practice. They say in Malden we don't have them. I'm a little skeptical, but I think that we need to really target them, close them. I support the Mystic River watershed. They are leading the charge here. These should not exist in Massachusetts.
Traffic cameras are an effective tool to reduce speeding and increase road safety. However, many citizens feel they can represent an invasion of privacy, particularly when companies like Flock are involved. Would you support the legalization of traffic cameras? And if so, what measures would you take to mitigate the privacy concerns?
I'm very concerned about surveillance right now and who can get access to that. And so as the liaison to our Police Community Advisory Council here, we've talked with our department about flock cameras, and I think we need way more secure protections about how long data can be kept, who can choose to keep it, and when it could be used, and when it could even be subpoenaed before I would consider this. I do think it could be a part of a solution for some of our highest risk intersections where people are really at risk of injury, but we have to resolve the broader surveillance issues first.
I mean, this is a great example of the balance and the considering of, different competing values that we have. So I'm the chair of the Emerging Technologies Caucus in the legislature because I know emerging technology can be an incredible tool to help us achieve things that we want, like a Vision Zero, fewer traffic injuries and deaths. At the same time, I'm the champion of the Location Shield Act that just passed the legislature with the ACLU of Massachusetts to make sure your location data cannot be tracked and sold to the highest bidder or used by a Trump administration to disappear you. So it is something that I'm open to, but there have to be very clear frameworks by which they could be used to avoid those types of consequences.
No. Red light cameras and these types of things actually increase traffic accidents. I've lived in communities that have red light cameras. People slam on their brakes and people are being rear-ended constantly. It does not have the impact that you think it does. We need to be designing our roads for the type of behavior that we want. Road diets, making them slower so that you actually have to drive the speed limit that you are expecting. And there was a good example on Bainbridge Street in Malden. We rolled out speed humps, and thanks to Councilor Murphy and Taylor, that is our first pilot. I think we should expand that.
Several cyclists over the last few years, including recently Louisa, have been killed by trucks. There are clear safety measures which can be taken to reduce these risks in the act expanding truck safety requirements filed by Senator Brownsberger, bill number Senate 2343. Would you make it a priority to get this bill passed in the 195th legislative session if it is not passed in the 194th?
Yes, absolutely. This feels like a no-brainer, and I would just say this is the kind of legislation that it really matters that advocates are pushing for and raising the profile on, so I'd be very honored to work with you on that.
Yes, this builds on the law I referenced much earlier in the night around requirements of safety infrastructure for the trucks that the state owns or leases. So this is a logical next step, and I'm pleased that it's filed by a bike enthusiast senator. You know, we all bring our unique perspectives to the table, and that's why it's so important to learn from, respect, and build collaborative relationships with the folks with whom you serve.
Yes, absolutely. We have to make our roads safer, and this is a no-brainer for me.
Alrighty. Thank you so much to all the candidates for taking the time to speak with us tonight. Transportation impacts everyone, whether it's a student walking to school, me on my bike ride to work, a grad student taking the Orange Line into Boston, or family going for a walk together. We like to give candidates, actually 2 minutes because you have been so good on time, to share any closing thoughts or ideas to wrap up the evening. Let's begin with Kate, and then Ryan, and then Carey.
Well, thank you, Noah, for an excellent job moderating us. And thank you to the hosts tonight, Malden Safe Streets, Friends of Malden River, your other, invited guests for questions, Bay State Co-Housing for hosting us, and really the other candidates here. I really appreciated the dialogue tonight and learning from each of you. I hope that you've all heard from my responses that these issues are near and dear to my heart. I'm really proud of the track record of success and the way that I've learned to learn from others, built coalitions and partnerships at the local level, at the state level, to get things done, whether as a city councilor or as your state representative. And I'd be proud to continue that work as your next state senator. I think the leadership that I've displayed and the track record that I have, accounts for the fact that I have the endorsements of the full Malden state delegation, that 35 local elected officials from every community in this district have stood behind this campaign that we're building together. I'm proud of the endorsement from the Environmental League of Massachusetts, as well as Keep Massachusetts Beautiful's recognition last year. And I'm certainly hoping that I'll earn your support as well as we continue with these last, 45 days of the campaign. So please learn more, be in touch if you have questions or ideas for me, and I certainly hope I'll earn your vote by September 1st.
So I'd also like to just thank the community advocates that have hosted this tonight. You are what is driving change in our community. I'll give you a few examples. The City Hall doors would not have ADA accessibility if it was not for Malden Safe Streets. So kudos to your advocacy when it comes to that. There are so many examples across our community that show community advocates are what is driving change in Malden. We have to keep that up. And I'm going to share a little bit, some personal stuff about me. Because like you, I'm also an advocate. And that started when I was at the home school, our elementary school, which is now the Early Learning Center. And we planted trees in our class. And I fell in love with planting trees. And decades later, I'm still planting trees, as you all know. It is something that brings great personal satisfaction to my life. I encourage you all to plant a tree. It's so cool to see it grow and be like, oh my God, we did that together. I want to talk a little bit about who I am and how I've worked over the last couple decades. I am happy to have endorsed all of my opponents previously. I helped them all get elected. I've done that consistently, and I helped get a progressive majority on the Malden City Council. And so I plan to do that in the Senate too. I was with a small minority on the Malden City Council, but by dedicated advocacy, working with community groups, we were able to get to a progressive majority. I think that we can do that in the Senate, and then the reason why I'm doing it in the Senate is it's only 40 members. The House has hundreds of members. It's very difficult to make institutional change, but in the Senate, you can absolutely do that. And I want to say this to speak personally to all the advocates here. I would say that what we have to make sure is we develop norms and expectations for people in the progressive movement of how we treat each other. I am not here to run for Congress. I am here to run for state Senate. I will never use a community advocate and throw them to the wayside and marginalize them to get a step ahead. I am here to work with each and all of you for the long haul. Thank you.
This has been great. I love talking policy. I love good questions, and I just want to say that there is so much that I think is possible that we have settled for less in Massachusetts in ways that I don't think we have to. I'll just tell you personally, growing up, my family didn't have a lot of money. We moved around a lot. I went to inner city public schools and made it through college on scholarship and went to grad school and night school and started out working minimum wage jobs. And the pathways that my family used to get to the middle class are just not even there anymore for our kids. The dream of having a community that everybody can find success in, can thrive, is always there, but we have to do a lot more to reach for it. It matters not just what we say, and we're a Democratic primary here, so hopefully you'll hear a lot of the same things from candidates. But the question is, where is our heart, and what are we gonna fight for, and what does it take to have impact? I believe it takes two things, both courage to stand by your values, especially on the tough votes, especially when friends are on the line, and it takes collaboration. You cannot dictate anything. As a legislator, you have to work with people to build coalitions, get things done. I hope if you've heard anything tonight, it's that is absolutely how I lead, is with you, with coalition, building that support that can actually get votes passed. I didn't even tell you who my endorsements are, y'all. So I just want to close with that. I am endorsed by Malden Mayor Gary Christensen. I am endorsed by more progressive organizations than any of the other candidates, including Mass Alliance, the Working Families Party, and Mystic Valley Progressives. I had the most union endorsements, including our local firefighters, the Boston Teachers Union, United Food and Commercial Workers who work at the Stop and Shop, and soon to be members of SEIU. So I'm very proud to be a strong and clear progressive candidate in this race. Open seats don't come around very often because we don't have term limits here. So I will be an advocate for you. I will fight for you in every single room that I am in, and I will make sure that we do not let that dream go with a more transparent and accountable legislature. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all the candidates again for taking the time and sharing these really thoughtful and spoken responses. We hope everyone here will recognize democracy is a two-way street. It's not just about candidates, but it's about the community holding them together, speaking with your neighbors. So we hope you will speak with your friends, your colleagues, and neighbors about the ideas you heard tonight to spread them far and wide. The primary election will take place on September 1st, the Tuesday before Labor Day. So take a moment to mark your calendars and make sure that you are registered to vote. There are also early voting options available. And to wrap us up, I will hand it over to Ali to share some upcoming announcements.
So I wanted Nuris to stand up. He's our secretary. So you are all basically here tonight because of this human setting time aside and organizing and coordinating with the teams for our candidates here. The idea started in May, and I can't believe it's finally here. It's a dream. Thank you, Weather. I'd also like to thank Noah. There's no way we could do this without an awesome team. Thank you. And so Lorraine, I wanted to say thank you for being our rock, and there she is. Yay, thank you. Because of her, we're in this space, and it's amazing and beautiful, and what a great, beautiful space for the community to see and share. And I would also like to thank John, that dude in the back. This is why you can hear me right now, because this guy came and worked his magic. Oh, yeah, and Chris from UMA, thank you so much for, yeah. This will make us look super professional, and we're super grateful. And thank you to all of you. Good night.